Hello, and welcome to Team CSFS's presentation on consumer security in the financial sector. The University of North Florida graduate students on this team consists of Taylor Bird, Connor Hayes, Alex Johnson, Daniel Prado, and Kelsey Shaw. Team CSFS's presentation will consist of an overview of consumer security in the financial sector, brief history of development, relevant IT components, uses and implications, relevant costs and benefits, relevant risks, and future trends. Consumer security in the financial sector is a broad topic, so our team decided to focus on the security and privacy of consumer financial information. Everyone at some point in their life has had an impact relating to their consumer security. Maybe it was a compromised credit card number, stolen identity, ransomware, or someone hacking your Bite Squad account, trying to order over $400 of Hooters chicken wings. The last example may seem silly, but it happened to one of our team members during the course of the class. How a company handles consumer financial information can depend on the size of the institution, type of institution, or even the technology they decide to invest in. A quick example of technology would be the use of artificial intelligence and security automation. Using those types of technologies has helped identify and contain breaches by shortening breach life cycles to under 200 days, which has institutions seeing a savings of $1.26 million. The security and privacy of consumer financial information is extremely important. Violations or security breaches can lead to a loss in customers, financial penalties, and financial impacts. A few interesting facts relating to consumer security in the financial sector would be institutions found in violation of certain acts could face fines of $100,000 for each violation. Stolen records cost financial firms $180 per record. The average breach in the financial sector in 2021 was $5.72 million, of which 38% is attributed to customer loss. Organizations that have high levels of security automation save almost $4 million per breach compared to those that do not. With the transition from a cash society to a charge or virtual society, everyone's consumer financial information is at risk. Advancements in technology have decreased the threat of fraud and continue to provide safe and reliable means of accessing financial data. Rules, regulations, compliance standards, and policies all help to improve customer security in the financial sector.
Now we're going to move into the history of development of the consumer security in the financial sector. First, we will start in 1970 with the Bank Secrecy Act, also known as the Currency and Foreign Transactions Reporting Act. This is a U.S. law requiring financial institutions in the United States to assist the U.S. government agencies in detecting and preventing money laundering and fraud. In 1976, we have the United States versus Miller court case. In 1973, sheriffs for Houston County, Georgia, discovered an undocumented whiskey distillery. They first seized a truck with distillery equipment and arrested its drivers, and were later investigating a warehouse fire in the town of Kathleen when they also discovered an actual distillery there. They identified the warehouse property leaser as Mitch Miller of Georgia. The Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau, also known as the ATF, of the United States Treasury Department, investigated the case and requested that the local banks holding all of Miller's account and records provide all paperwork of its bank transactions to date via a grand jury subpoena, rather than a warrant. The banks compiled this list and file without notifying Miller. The financial records supported evidence that Miller had rented the truck, radio equipment, and sheet metal to support the distillery, and he and 4 others were charged with the conspiracy and possession of distilled spirits and possession of an unregistered still. The ruling held that bank records are not subject to protection under the 4th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Moving to the 1978 Rights for Financial Privacy Act, this gives customers of financial institutions the right to some level of privacy from government searches. Before the act was passed, the United States government did not have to tell customers that it was accessing their records, and customers did not have the right to prevent such actions. This act came about after the United States Supreme Court ruling of the United States versus Miller case previously discussed. Now moving into 1999, we have the Financial Modernization Act of 1999, also known as the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. The FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, is one of the federal agencies that enforces provisions of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. And the law covers not only banks, but also security firms, insurance companies, companies providing many other types of financial products and services as well. Under the law, agencies enforce the Financial Privacy Rule, which governs how financial institutions can collect and disclose customers' personal financial information, and the Safeguard Rule, which requires all financial institutions to maintain safeguards to protect customer information. Now moving to 2001, we have the USA Patriot Act. The Patriot Act was enacted after the September 11th attack and the 2001 anthrax attack, with the stated goal of dramatically tightening U.S. national security, particularly as it pertained to foreign terrorism. 2002, we have the Sarbanes-Oxley. This is a law that the U.S. government passed on July 30th of 2002 to help protect investors from fraudulent financial reporting by corporations, also known as the SOX Act of 2002. It mandated strict reforms to existing security regulations and imposed tough new penalties on lawbreakers. The Act of 2002 came in response to financial scandals in the early 2000s involving publicly traded companies such as Enron Corporation, Tyco International, and WorldCom. Moving on to 2004, we have the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, an information security standard for organizations that handle branded credit cards from the major card schemes. The PCI standard is mandated by the card brands but administered by the Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council. The standard was created to increase controls around cardholder data to reduce credit card fraud. In 2005, we had the ISO IEC 27001. And this is an international standard on how to manage information security. The standard was originally published jointly by the International Organization of Standards, ISO, and the International Electrotechnical Commission, IEC, in 2005, and then revised again in 2013. It details requirements for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving an information security management system, ISMS. The aim of which is to help organizations make the information assets they hold more secure. A European update of the standard was published in 2017. Organizations that meet the standard's requirements can choose to be certified by an accredited certification body following successful completion of an audit. The effectiveness of the ISO IEC 27001 certification process and the overall standards has been addressed in a recent large-scale study for its effectiveness. In 2007, we have FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. This is a private American corporation that acts as an SRO, self-regulatory organization that regulates member brokerage firms and exchange markets. An organization that has established a set of rules for protecting customer data from compromise. FINRA also promotes controls for detecting cyber threats and mitigating their impact. In 2010, we had the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. This is a United States federal law that was enacted on July 21st of 2010. The law overhauled financial regulations in the aftermath after the Great Recession and made changes affecting all federal financial regulators, agencies, and almost every part of the nation's financial services. Legislation based on its proposal was introduced in the United States House of Representatives by Congressman Frank and the United States Senate by Senator Dodd, which is why it's called the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform. Dodd-Frank reorganized the financial regulatory system, eliminating the Office of Thrift Supervision, assigning new responsibilities to existing agencies like the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, and creating new agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB. And lastly, we have, in 2015, the USA Freedom Act. This act restored and modified several provisions of the Patriot Act, which had expired the day prior. The act imposes some new limits on the bulk collection of telecommunication metadata on U.S. citizens by American intelligence agencies, including the National Security Agency. It also restores authorization for roving wiretaps and tracking lone wolf terrorists. It was meant to end the bulk collection of Americans' metadata by the NSA and the secret laws created by the FISA court, and introduce a special advocate to represent public and privacy matters.
Hello, so my name is Connor Hayes. I apologize from that. I will be discussing the IT components and uses. We did combine them both together as we did feel it made more sense to talk about the component and then how it's relevant to the consumer in the industry today. So for the first section, we're going to go through a series of components that are in this. The first one is multi-factor authentication. This was really introduced recently to increase the security of consumers' accounts, both on top of a static password that they may use and may never really change, and really introduce a new layer of security that focuses on a physical component and being able to verify who you are through either your cell phone or receiving a one-time password through an email or even a randomly generated key. We see this through programs like Google Authenticator. They will generate a random code every 15 or 20 seconds that will only work for that time period. So it really does give consumers peace of mind and security to easily put in that code and get into their accounts. On top of this, it adds to the convenience of resetting passwords. So this really did kill two birds with one stone. Not only can they add a layer of security, but in the event there is a loss of the password and the consumer is unaware, they can go through that two-step or multi-factor or whatever their authentication process is and then reset their password. The next thing is SSL encryption. This is whenever you go to a website, it's secure socket layers. So this really focuses on having a certificate for the website. That way you can identify it very, very quickly as being safe to use. Companies are required to update this license every so often. They pay for a period. And you can even view the certificate if you do go to the top right, left of your screen to the HTTPS, and it'll have a little lock. If you click on that, it's a very safe way to view the certificate and ensure you're on a safe site. This is really important whenever we're dealing with usernames, passwords, financial information, anything that needs to be kept secure between where you're entering the information and ultimately where it's going. That's where that layer of security is really beneficial. The next thing is the invention of the plastic chip into your debit or credit card. We've all been faced with the updates of that, and that was quite a revolutionary movement whenever they had to change out every single POS at every grocery store, ATM, gas station to accept these chip cards. It did even take quite a while for people to get used to using them. But with the chip card, it adds another layer of security which reduces the likelihood of them being skimmed. So with your magnetic card, individuals can normally walk by you and steal your card information. With the chip, it has to be activated, and then it sends it through the POS to your financial institution, and it reports back, what account this is. Do you have the necessary funds? And can you complete the payment? Like I said, there was high innovation costs. It required the entire market to revolutionize the way they do it. And even now, there's several security features that says your chip has to fail 3 times before you can manually swipe your card and go back to the old method. Another thing with the chip is that it is covered by the liability, so if somebody does steal your card and they do find a way to copy your chip or put it into a different card, you can get that money back through your financial institution. Another thing that was revolutionary was the Apple Pay tokenization, and I think that anybody with a smartphone, whether it's Android Pay, Apple Pay, or Google Pay, has used this, and it's completely beneficial, right? The ability to walk up with your phone, use your biometrics or your Face ID or your password to make a purchase has completely changed the game. And the great part about this is that it utilizes a token to encrypt your data from the source to your financial institution. And this randomly generated token cannot be returned to figure out who you are unless you know the code to break it, essentially. And that's only sent to the institution after the token's been sent. So they have a way to decrypt it. So as it's in transit over the internet, there's no possibility of somebody getting that token and getting your data, which is really beneficial for consumers. So it really adds that extra layer of security to everything and make sure it's, you're being protected every single step of the way. Moving more into the internal side, we do have disaster recovery sites, and this is really important for financial institutions to have a plan in place whenever it comes to catastrophic failure, whether it be an attack or a system failure or a technology issue or an update or a power outage or whatever the case may be. Having contingencies in place to be able to ensure continuity over unplanned outages is very, very important. And we see it as important now, especially with the times that they are, vulnerabilities in systems are present all the time. And we saw this with the Log4j, which required an immediate update to all systems due to the vulnerability it allowed. And so when it comes into planning for these kind of things, we need to be thinking about, what are the possible things that may happen? How do we plan to prevent them? How do we ensure that the business is going to stay running? And ultimately, how do we get back to our original system? How do we get back on track? So really going through those and having a very solid plan is very important to your IT systems. Another thing that was really revolutionary was the contactless payments with your cards. And this does add a fair bit of vulnerability in terms of the ability to just, hit your card on top of the machine and then get your information without having to do a PIN most of the times. There's a little bit of vulnerability when you don't have to do the PIN or your zip code, but some systems have integrated this with multi-factor again, and you go on your phone, your banking app, and approve the purchase while it's pending. So your financial institution will get a request, and you'll hit the OK to release your information, and it'll check it. And that's a really good way to prevent identity theft and fraud. Another thing is doing some self-protection. A lot of things these days are email scams of phishing and fraud that you may not be accustomed to. You may be expecting an email from your financial institution and you get one, but it may be from an address that's spoofed like yours, right? It may look like Chase, but the A might be an @ symbol, but you may not realize it. And if you were to click on those websites and enter in your information, that could be vulnerable to attackers and other people to steal your information, and we really don't want that. And so institutions nowadays are taking a very strong approach to informing their members and educating them on what could happen and how to prevent your identity from being stolen. Ensure you're at a credible source, ensure you're looking at everything over twice. Internal threats are a really big one. This goes in from anywhere from employee terminations to improperly handling data, uploading to the wrong site, not securing an account number or a social security number, or even being careless, right? And just using a file transfer method that isn't secure, right, through email or something like that. Those things prevent a huge risk for consumers and their information, especially when it comes to financial institutions sending that data off, whether it be to analyze or generate or loan offers or whatever the case may be to an outside vendor. making sure those systems are secure in between the transfer is very, very important. And as well as, having a good policy in place for terminations or resignations. Disgruntled employees, we don't want them to have any kind of vindictive action after the fact that could really damage our reputation. And finally, physical threats. And we've seen these a lot as of recent, and they're becoming increasingly hard to spot. Specifically at ATMs and gas station pumps, skimmers are used to steal your information. And we can see here where the skimmer has been placed over where you insert your card, and it looks pretty innocuous, right? You would never know if that was there, but giving a good wiggle whenever you try to put your card in there first will give you a good indication of whether it's true. On the left, we see one that's a little bit more difficult to spot because it is ultimately flush with the pad, but again, you can easily get your PIN number just by having that on top of it, right? The functionality remains the same, but an individual can easily get your card information just by using these simple tools. And having that kind of precaution whenever you walk up to an ATM is very vital to keeping your information secure. Go to ATMs you trust. Don't go to an ATM. Prefer to go to one at a branch of a bank or a Publix as opposed to the one in the back of a bar or something like that.
All right, well, good morning or good afternoon and even good evening to whomever will be watching this portion of our PowerPoint. My name is Daniel Prado, and I will be covering the relevant cost and benefits when it comes to consumer financial services and security. Just a quick brief overview of what I'm going to discuss here. Focuses will be, again, how much it usually costs for cybersecurity for the financial service area, and how it's changed, from back then to now, whether it has increased or decreased due to the advancement of technology, due to new ways of security being upgraded, and even new ways that hackers and fraudulent organizations come in and take advantage of such upgrades or newer technology, as again usually there is a weak point in those areas. All right, so in this first portion, we're going to go ahead and just review a little bit on the financial services market. As we know, it is one of the biggest markets in society today. Of course, it includes our banks, our investment companies, where we hold our money, our daily working, our daily livings, whether that be a checking or savings account in the bank, and now banks even include a form of investment account, whether it be through CDs, bonds, or again stocks, which leads us into financial services such as investing companies as Fidelity Investments, Charles Schwab, Goldman Sachs, and continuing on. But as we can see here, in 2019, the global financial services market was valued about $22 trillion. This was given 3 years ago. Granted, with the economy in its state now, it could be more, could be less, but it's still a pretty hefty chunk of money there. With that being said, that's exactly what makes it a huge target for hackers and other malicious organizations to get into, whether to get private information to access these accounts, or again, just blatantly steal your money. According to IBM, the security cost of a data breach report in 2019 was $5.86 million. 5.86 million on average. Again, this was 3 years ago, and then with the advancement of technology, things may have gotten better, things may have gotten worse, but we'll continue reviewing on here. So, and continue on to this next slide, we're still going ahead and talking about costs. On the slide here, you can actually see a couple of statistics on how much it usually costs for an actual cyber attack to happen and be successful, in the aspect of the malicious person or persons, organizations that are going after these sectors of finances, how much they actually can make off of this compared to how much it actually costs for a large to mid to a small business to actually invest into protecting their assets. Some major examples of actual incidents that happened were SolarWinds was a company. Around 2020, they were compromised, lost a lot of personal identifying information, and even money, resulting in a loss of $25 million to its investors. Another big one that happened not too long ago was Amazon was targeted with a DDoS attack that actually cost them about $75 million. And that's just, small examples of past experiences that have happened. But as you can see here, it's about $243,000 per attack that happens. And then on average, it takes about 55.1 days to rectify or fix this situation, rather than just spending, for large firms, $2 million to $5 million, mid-size, $500,000 to $2 million, and small businesses, $500,000 on cybersecurity. It could really, really go a long way. And just to wrap up, the continuous benefit of actually investing in good cybersecurity, where you'd be a small, medium, or large size firm, it's definitely a lot more cost efficient. Again, $500,000 for a small firm compared to, losing $25 million like SolarWinds did. Or again, for a bigger firm like Amazon, $2 to $5 million compared to $75 million that they lost after that DDoS attack. Again, the benefit is you consider about only 3% of your revenue goes in the direction of cybersecurity, and it should definitely be preferred. The biggest thing is you want your clients, your investors, the people who you provide your services to feel safe with putting their money or other finances entrusted into you. And this is why it's important and a great benefit to have good cybersecurity.
In this section, we'll be discussing the relevant risks to consumer security. When we think of relevant risks that affect consumer financial data, the most common risk that comes to mind is fraud, specifically digital fraud. Digital fraud can be defined as the use of a computer for criminal deception or abuse of web-enabled assets that results in financial gain. A survey was conducted in 2019 with 2,000 Americans and found that 49%, almost half of those surveyed, have been a victim of fraudulent data breach. A few examples of digital fraud are hacking, identity theft, and transaction interception. Later on, we'll talk about platform and technology unreliability, which involves mobile banking apps and POS devices, such as credit card readers. According to the FTC 2021 CSN data book, the top 3 payment methods for fraud reports are credit cards, payment app or service, and debit cards, with gift cards close behind. It's interesting to look at the comparison between the number of reports made and the total dollars lost, because the top 3 are not the same. For example, the company I work for is headquartered in China. When we need to make a wire transfer, it's usually a couple $1,000,000. So the wire transfers in cryptocurrency most likely result in greater loss because the amounts being transferred are so great, whereas the average credit card fraud is a couple $1,000s. In the same report published by the FTC in 2021, this graph shows the number of reports by type. In the early 2000s, fraud, identity theft, and other reports appear to be relatively the same. However, between 2018 and 2020, fraud took a huge increase of approximately 40%. The data for 2022 has not been published yet, but it's safe to assume that these numbers are still climbing. Platform and technology unreliability risks are another large component to the overall risk of consumer financial data. The most common risks to mobile banking are mobile malware installed by hackers, phishing, which is sending fake emails requesting personal data that appear to be from well-known organizations, and fake apps designed to look like the real mobile banking app. Point of sale or POS devices are susceptible to malware infections too. Visa recently discovered that hackers were installing malicious software into POS terminals by phishing emails that contained contaminated links. Once the links were clicked and the malware was installed, hackers were able to remotely steal credit card information and other sensitive consumer information. Also, without proper encryption security, hackers can intercept transactions, which is known as the middleman attack. In this section, we'll be discussing the future consumer security trends in the financial sector. Future trends for consumer security are broken down into electronic or contactless payments, mobile banking app updates, and strengthening of the security safeguards rule by the FTC. With the increase in popularity of contactless payments due to COVID, advanced security measures have developed. The measures include industry standard encryption that contains a unique secret key, and no two devices share the same key. Dynamic data allows the data to be unique for each transaction, so any intercepted data can't be used for other transactions. Two-factor authentication usually involves an authentication code where owners can either accept or deny access. Mobile banking has also increased post-COVID, and security features include encryption, authentication, alerts, strict international banking regulations, and thorough quality assurance testing. The FTC recently updated the security safeguard rule so that financial institutions must limit access to consumer data and make sure encryption is used. They also mandated that a single individual should be designated to oversee an information security program.
This is the end of our presentation. The next 4 slides are the references used. Thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.